The Passion of Christ. The Trial. Jerusalem, the high priest's courtyard and praetorium, early morning. It was before the first light of dawn when the soldiers and officers of the chief priests bound Jesus and led him first to Annas, the father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was high priest that year. John 18:12-13. Annas questioned him about his disciples and his teaching. Jesus answered plainly, "I have spoken openly to the world. Ask those who heard me." A soldier struck him across the face for the remark, and yet no charge could be formed. They sent him bound to Caiaphas. John 18:19-24. The Sanhedrin had assembled in the night, a gathering of chief priests, elders, and scribes. False witnesses were brought forward, but their testimonies contradicted one another. Mark 14:55-59. At last Caiaphas stood and put the question directly, "Are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One?" Jesus replied, "I am, and you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power, coming with the clouds of heaven." The high priest tore his robes. "Blasphemy," they declared. The verdict was death. Mark 14:61-64. "Are you the King of the Jews?" Pilate asked. Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not of this world." John 18:33-36. At daybreak, the entire council brought Jesus to Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor. Luke 23:1. They accused him of perverting the nation, forbidding the payment of taxes, and claiming to be the Messiah king. Pilate examined him and found no basis for a charge. Luke 23:2-4. Learning Jesus was Galilean, he sent him to Herod Antipas, who happened to be in Jerusalem. Herod and his soldiers mocked him, dressed him in an elegant robe, and returned him to Pilate. Luke 23:7-11. 3 times Pilate declared, "I find no guilt in this man." He offered to release a prisoner according to the festival custom, but the crowd cried out for Barabbas, a convicted insurrectionist, and demanded that Jesus be crucified. Pilate, wishing to satisfy the crowd, had Jesus flogged. Mark 15:6-15, John 19:1. The soldiers plaited a crown of thorns, thrust it onto his head, and wrapped a purple robe around his shoulders. They beat him and mocked him, calling out, "Hail, King of the Jews!" John 19:2-3. Pilate, fearing an insurrection, finally yielded. He washed his hands before the crowd, a gesture of absolution, and handed Jesus over to be crucified. Matthew 27:24-26. They made Jesus carry his own cross out through the city gates toward Golgotha, the place of the skull. John 19:17. The weight of the beam and the damage from the flogging was immense. On the road, the soldiers seized Simon of Cyrene, a man coming in from the country, and compelled him to carry the cross the rest of the way. Luke 23:26. A great crowd followed, including women who wept for him. Jesus turned and said to them, "Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me, weep for yourselves and for your children." Luke 23:27-28. 2 criminals were crucified alongside him, one on his right, one on his left. Mark 15:27. The soldiers offered Jesus wine mixed with myrrh, a crude analgesic, but he refused it. Mark 15:23. They nailed him to the cross. It was 9 in the morning. Mark 15:25. Above his head, Pilate had placed a written charge, "Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews," written in Hebrew, Latin, and Greek, so that all who passed could read it. John 19:19-20. As he hung there, the soldiers cast lots for his garments, the last of his earthly possessions, fulfilling the ancient psalm. They divided my garments among themselves and cast lots for my clothing. Psalm 22:18, John 19:23-24. Passers-by shook their heads and jeered, "You who would destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days, save yourself. Come down from the cross." The chief priests and scribes also mocked him. He saved others, he cannot save himself. Mark 15:29-32. Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. Luke 23:34. One of the criminals crucified beside him joined in the mockery, but the other rebuked him. "We are getting what our deeds deserve, but this man has done nothing wrong." Then he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." Jesus replied, "Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise." Luke 23:39-43. Standing near the cross were his mother Mary, her sister Mary Magdalene, and the disciple whom Jesus loved. Jesus looked at his mother and then at the disciple and said, "Woman, here is your son," and to the disciple, "Here is your mother." From that hour, the disciple took her into his own home. John 19:25-27. At noon, a darkness came over the whole land and lasted 3 hours. Mark 15:33. The sun ceased its light. In the middle of the afternoon, the 9th hour, Jesus cried out in a loud voice in Aramaic, "Eloi, Eloi, lema sabachthani," my God, why have you forsaken me?" Mark 15:34, Psalm 22:1. Some who stood there misunderstood, thinking he was calling for Elijah. Knowing that all was now completed, Jesus said, "I am thirsty." A jar of sour wine was there, and someone soaked it in a sponge, put it on a stalk of hyssop, and lifted it to his lips. John 19:28-29. When Jesus had tasted it, he said, "It is finished." Then he called out in a loud voice, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." Luke 23:46. It is finished. He bowed his head and gave up his spirit. John 19:30. At the moment of his death, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook, rocks split, tombs broke open. Matthew 27:51-52. The Roman centurion standing guard, who had watched it all, was shaken to his core. He said, "Surely this man was the Son of God." Mark 15:39. The crowd that had gathered to watch began to leave, beating their chests in grief. Luke 23:48. Because it was the day of preparation and the Sabbath was about to begin, the Jewish leaders asked Pilate to have the legs of the crucified men broken to hasten death. The soldiers broke the legs of the 2 criminals beside Jesus, but when they came to Jesus, they found he was already dead. John 19:31-33. Instead, one of the soldiers pierced his side with a spear, and at once blood and water poured out. John 19:34. The eyewitness who recorded this attested, "His testimony is true." This also fulfilled the scriptures, "Not one of his bones will be broken," and "They will look on the one they have pierced." Psalm 34:20, Zechariah 12:10, John 19:35-37. As evening approached, a wealthy man from Arimathea named Joseph, a member of the Sanhedrin who had himself been looking for the kingdom of God and had not consented to their plan, went boldly to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. Mark 15:43, Luke 23:51. Pilate was surprised that Jesus had died so quickly and summoned the centurion to confirm it. Mark 15:44-45. When he was assured, he granted the body to Joseph. Nicodemus, the Pharisee who had once come to Jesus by night, came bringing a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 75 pounds in weight, a lavish amount befitting a king. John 19:39. Together, Joseph and Nicodemus took the body of Jesus and wrapped it in linen cloths with the spices, according to the Jewish custom of burial.